Welcome to Knife Chats. If you like this video, please take a moment to leave a comment. Thank you. I thought today I would look at my Marbles Fly Fisherman knife. Now these have been around for quite some time, and actually the particular one I'm looking at now is made by Marbles in the recent years. This knife has been made by Case and several other people over the years. I think the pattern itself is probably going on close to 100 years old. And it's really a nice little knife, very slim line. And on the back side you see here it's got a 3-inch ruler. I'll talk a little bit about the ruler in a minute. But on the front side is the really cool thing about it is this Fly Fisherman etch. And this etch has been on this knife for the longest time that I can remember too. Now like I said, this is a modern era one. I think I bought this one about 6 or 7 years ago. And at that time Marbles was a house brand for Smoky Mountain Knife Works. And I think I paid right around $10 or $12 for it, and I think it still goes for right around $10 or $12. Really an interesting knife, and well, let's take a look at it. Now normally when you start looking at a knife you usually look at the main blade first, but in this case I'm going to look at the blade that makes the Fly Fisherman the Fly Fisherman, and that would be this blade right here, the pick. It's a nice little steel pick that's attached to the knife. It doesn't come off. And it really is the tool that makes the Fly Fisherman the Fly Fisherman. And it actually is a very useful tool for just about anybody out there who fishes. I find it especially useful for cleaning out jigs. Okay, if you fish, you've probably seen your jigs, and they usually come like this with the hole that the line is supposed to pass through covered with paint. And this is typical of any kind of store-bought jig, and also typically when you paint a jig yourself, often that hole will get filled with paint. And that's where the pick on your Fly Fisherman knife comes in real handy. So it's easy enough. You take your pick and you jam it into the hole of the eye, and you just start drilling into it, and then you start picking it all out. And the end result is something like this. You wind up with a nice clean hole so you can pass your fishing line through there and tie your jig to your line. And that's what I use the pick for. You can also use the file to work around the edges of the eye here so that you can clean it up a bit more and make it also easier to get the line on there. And another use for the pick itself is for tying knots, so you can actually like wrap lines around there so you have something a little more secure when you're dealing with those really lightweight lines like 2 and 4 pound lines and such. So it helps you also with tying knots and such like that. So the pick is actually a very useful tool on your Fly Fisherman knife. Okay, moving on from the pick, we'll go over to the other tool on this side, and that's the scissors. Now obviously the scissors are going to cut paper just fine, but more importantly they cut a variety of fishing line. I've used this for line as light as 2 pound all the way up to 20 pound, both monofilament and fluorocarbon. I have not used it on braid, so I don't know how well they would work with braid. And the important thing though is they will work on both light lines and some of the heavier lines. And to me that's important because sometimes a scissor will work great on a 10 or 20 pound line, but when you start cutting that 2 or 4 pound line, it just slides in between and does not cut. In the case of this, you might sometimes have to put a little tautness on the line, but these will cut 2 pound line just as easily as they'll cut 20 pound line. And that's pretty good for a pair of scissors on a little knife like this. Let's move over to the other two tools. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is a file on here. And if you notice also, the tip of it is for a hook remover. I have never had really good luck using these for a hook remover. Matter of fact, any hook remover on a folding fish knife, I've just had absolutely no luck on it. The idea is you pass this down the line until you get to the hook, and then you can pull the hook out with it. I use Needlenose Pliers. I find these to be almost like cruel and unusual punishment on fish. If you know how to use them and you do a really good job with them, great for you. But for me, the hook remover part just doesn't work. Of course, you can actually, if you wanted to, you could actually file that down and make the tip into a screwdriver. But even as it is, you can still use this as a flathead screwdriver to some level. The more important thing on here is the file as far as I'm concerned. And the file is good. It's good for filing your nails. It's also good for removing paint off of things. And also it works good as a striker for like strike anywhere matches and stuff. So if you're looking for a file, it's got a file on it. And I do find the file somewhat useful. Much better than a fish scaler as far as I'm concerned. I'd much rather have the file than a fish scaler. The other tool on here that we haven't gotten to is the main blade, which is a really nice California clip blade, about 2.5 inches long. Well, let's actually measure it and find out. We've got here our honest and dishonest fishermen. Alright, the blade length is actually just over 2.25 inches long, but the actual cutting edge is just under or just over 2 inches long. So not the largest blade that you're going to find, but then the blade is not really designed for like cutting up fish or anything. This is a tool that the fisherman's going to be using for a variety of other uses. In this case, you'd probably be using that line just like you would the scissors for cutting something loose or something like that. So a nice little handy blade on the knife. Now, if you notice, the knife is kind of wide, and that's because if you notice, there's actually 2 layers here with the 2 middle springs going down the middle here, and you can see the rivets here in the middle that hold the springs in place. So it's really a 2-sided knife, and you see on the back your ruler. Now, like I mentioned before, there's not a lot of fish that you're going to measure with a 3-inch ruler. So really what this ruler is probably going to be best used for is for making a makeshift ruler by measuring a stick or something in the event that you actually forgot your ruler. So I'm not sure how helpful that's going to be in the long run. I suppose if you've forgotten a ruler and you've finally managed to catch that record-keeping bass, then you might want to go ahead and quickly make a ruler using this, but you can measure it somewhere else also. I think it's really just there because they wanted to put something on the back side of it, and when it comes to fishing knives, you'll always find gadgets on there, but that's probably more what that ruler is for. But if you ever need a 3-inch ruler, you've got one on the back of your Marbles Fly Fisherman. And I should also mention that this ruler has been showing up on the back of these knives since the beginning, it seems. So, pretty interesting knife, and I'm really happy to have it in my collection, but also, more importantly, this is a knife that I actually throw in my tackle box and take out with me, because it is a very slim knife, fits in the pocket well. You do have a little bail down here so you can hook it onto your gear. Takes up no space, and it's got some very important tools that you can use in your tackle box. So good looking knife, and also a very practical knife for the fisherman, whether he be a fly fisherman, an ice fisherman, or just an everyday angler. That's my take, at least. So in review, what we're looking at is the Marbles MR168 Fly Fisherman. Marbles is a respected company out of Gladstone, Michigan. However, it went bankrupt a few years back, and at that time, the trademark was picked up by SMKW, or Smoky Mountain Knife Works, and knives such as this were actually no longer made in Gladstone, Michigan, but were made in China. Now, this particular knife features 440A stainless steel blades, and then a stainless steel scales on both sides along with the rivets and the shackle on the end here. Overall closed dimensions are 3 7/8 of an inch by 1 inch by 3/16 of an inch, which means it's a very slim knife, fits into a tackle box with no problem, and it also fits into a pocket with no problem. Overall length of the main blade is 2 1/4 inches with a 2-inch cutting edge. The scissors are also 2 1/4 inches long, but the jaws on the scissors have a 3/4 inch cutting edge. The overall length of the pick is 1 3/4 inches, but the pick portion of it is only 1.5 inches long. And finally, the longest tool on the knife is actually the file hook remover, which comes in at 3 inches long, but the filing surface is only 2.5 inches long. I have used and carried this knife for several years now, and as you can tell, it's holding up pretty well. The stainless steel sides really don't scratch up too much, and you can usually just buff out the scratches and such. And the blades have been pretty sharp over the time, so I'm really pleased with the knife. And while it's not my usual go-to fishing knife, I have used it quite often, and I do really use the pick quite a bit for not only when I'm out fishing, but also around the house and such. And finally, the edge on the front here actually is pretty deep. It doesn't look that deep, but it is pretty deep and it holds up pretty well. As you can tell, the Fly Fisherman portion is much deeper. It's not going anywhere soon. And the ruler on the back is, like I said, kind of short. It's only 3 inches long. I've seen this on a lot of stainless steel knives. I'm not sure what the big deal is with it, but it does come in handy once in a while. This one is broken down to 1/8 of an inch, which is handy. But to use this ruler to measure anything large would probably require using this ruler to make a larger ruler instead of actually trying to measure something 3 inches at a time with this ruler, if that makes any sense. Perhaps that would be an idea for another video, or then again, perhaps not. And as for my final thought, if there is one thing I would like to see done with this knife, is I would like to see a shorter file which would allow for a little bit larger of a main blade. Because if you were able to get like a 2.5 or 2 3/4 inch main blade into this frame, it would be a little more useful. And you could probably do that by making a shorter file screwdriver kind of combination, because then the file would not take up as much room. At least that's my thought on it. I don't need the hook remover, but I do like the file itself. But at the end of the day, what you have with the Marbles Fly Fisherman is a very affordable knife, a very functional knife, and a very nice looking knife. And it goes into your tackle box without even thinking about it. And it's, you can use it, any kind of fisherman can use it because of the tools that are on there. And because of its low price, it's something that you could easily buy for those young fishermen who are just starting off for their tackle box, like your son or daughter who are just getting into fishing. Be a great first knife for any kind of fisherman. And also just a nice handy knife to just carry around also because of its slim build. It's going to drop in your pocket and you're not even going to worry about it. So terrific knife, very low price, and a classic design that's been around forever. So if you like fishing, this might be a knife that you'll want to pick up. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Knife Chats, and if you did, please like and share it with your friends. Comments are always welcome. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode of Knife Chats is up online. Thanks again. Hope to see you soon.